in Gen Z, and that we can talk all day about the why behind this soft skills deficiency. And there's a lot of arguments related to that. They're not being taught it in school. They're not being taught it at home. It's because of our society is falling apart. It's because they spend way too much time on devices. It's probably a lot of those things all combined. But the fact is that it just exists, that deficiency exists. And unfortunately, the workplace is impacted. So it falls to all of you, and the workplace has to deal with it somehow. How you deal with it is up to you. You know, you can just carry the burden and end up with a workplace that kind of stinks, or you can focus on training those people, or repeatedly lay people off or fire them, and then go through this constant cycle of rehiring. I mean, I don't know how you deal with it, but the gap exists, or the deficiency exists. So these are kind of the impact, the way that the impact is felt. There's miscommunication and incompetent communication. And then that sort of leads to increased conflict, difficulty collaborating, burden of leadership on a few, while others shirk responsibility. And that sort of, you know, like when you have a few, whether it's a few Gen Z who are really strong and they step up and then the rest sort of shirk the responsibility, that can happen. Or your leaders who already were working there, and then you hire these folks with a soft skills deficiency and they just don't really know how to handle responsibility. And so that responsibility is shirked. Here are some other ways that gap or deficiency is felt. Through decreased productivity, like poor time management, difficulty solving problems and making decisions, a major lack of creativity. A lot of Gen Z are actually okay at following directions, but if you just give them some generic instruction and ask them to apply it, can you solve this problem, but don't give them any instructions, they will freak out. And I know this from teaching them, that they don't do very well with vague instruction. There's often an inability to brainstorm or research without technology. So also, you know, like if you give them a whiteboard and ask them to brainstorm, sometimes that can kind of freak them out, much more than like if you hand them, if they all have their phones and you're like, can you guys figure out how to solve this problem? Well, they'll just start Googling stuff, you know. Sometimes there's an inefficiency issue. There can sometimes be a lot of frustration and increased stress on your more tenured employees. So if you bring on, let's say you have a team of like 10 people, and 3 of those new employees, there are 3 new employees and 7 tenured employees. Having 3 new employees who are part of Gen Z can be a lot of stress on those other 7. And so you've kind of got to give kind of a break to those 7 who are more tenured and take that into account also. Then lastly, and I think sometimes we underestimate how much of this is caused when we hire Gen Z and we aren't providing any training or aren't taking into account that soft skills deficiency, is that there is going to be tension. And that tension can lead to lower morale. It can lead to a lot of conflict, and that can affect your organizational culture. Maybe not right away, but over time. And here are just some, you know, kind of bottom line effects of this soft skills deficiency in the workplace, and some dollar figures that you can be looking at. One of those is that the cost of miscommunication per year for companies, for small companies, so we're talking about 100 or fewer employees, and that's $420,000. And then the cost of annual unresolved or mismanaged conflict in the United States is about $359 billion. And then lastly, the cost of firing an incompetent entry-level employee who's making about $40,000 a year salary. So that's, you know, just an entry-level employee is about $20,000. And that's because we're looking at, if you let them go, then you're looking at having to rehire somebody, the onboarding, the training, the recruiting process for bringing in somebody new. So that's what I was talking about, that cycle of like, yeah, you can let them go, then you've got to bring somebody else in. You got to do that thing all over again. And you get in this cycle. It's almost like buying a new car and only driving it for a year and then another new car. You know, it's just maybe not the smartest way to go about it. So there has to be like a solution, hopefully. So it's not all gloom and doom that we're talking about. How can you help Gen Z employees who are lacking soft skills? There are ways to do it because, believe it or not, soft skills can be taught. They're not just magical talents. Soft skills are a combination of talent and